joined by the CEO of Auckland International Airport, Adrian Littlewood. Adrian, firstly, thanks so much for joining us as part of NZX's Issuer Milestone series. You're, of course, here today to talk to us, firstly, about the ambitious 30-year plan that the airport announced last year. You've promised a brand new second runway by 2025 and a rail link to the airport. Can you give us a bit of an update on how things are progressing, please?
Sure. 2014 was a really big year for us in terms of thinking about our long-term plan for Auckland Airport. We announced the master plan, which we call Airport of the Future, early last year, and really what that was about making sure that Auckland Airport was prepared to respond to the complete transformation in tourism markets in Asia Pacific in the next 30 years. Our plan takes us from today about 15 million passengers to potentially 40 million passengers by 2044, and a doubling in aircraft movements in that time. So it's a really significant change for us. So we've been very hard at work in the last few years in terms of building that plan so that it can be delivered in a stageable, affordable and flexible way for the longer term, which we think is the right way to go about it. And that's gained really great support from the airlines, aviation markets and all the other tourism stakeholders involved, which we think is fantastic. So now this phase we're in now is very much turning that vision into a reality.
Yeah.
And we're very hard at work in terms of building the detail about how that project over 30 years will unfold. And the good news, we've already started. We've just completed a refurb of the domestic terminal to give it a bit more life, so we can plan for the longer term replacement of that. We've just announced and completed half of a 40% increase in baggage belt capacity at the international terminal, and we've announced a major upgrade and a doubling of capacity of the departures process of the international terminal. The next phase is now to then work on the detailed planning around bringing the international and domestic terminal together for the longer term, and it's a very significant project and one we've got to invest a lot of time in over the next few years. So it's a big program ahead of us, but it's also very, very exciting, and I think it talks to the prospects for New Zealand tourism that we think it's important to go for this.
You're coming up having been listed on the NZX for 17 years, which is a great achievement. Congratulations. During this time, though, you've twice been voted in the top 10 airports in the world, which of course is another great achievement. How do you think your airport stands out both to travellers but also to your stakeholders?
Look, I think it's a couple of things. One is, we're incredibly proud of those awards, and I think they are recognition of both airport people, but everyone who works at the airport, and there are many companies that do. And we were recently voted the best in the region 6 times in a row, and the second best for our size in the world. So it's a great recognition to gain. But it does come down to people, and I think the distinctly New Zealand way of engaging with people is a big part of that. But we also put a lot of effort into understanding what customers want and constantly trying to reinvest to bring new services or new ways of engaging with them to make sure they are getting the kind of service and experience that they expect from a New Zealand's primary airport. I think from a stakeholder point of view, I think it's slightly different. I think the thing that's really changed in terms of our business in the last 5 or so years has been our shift from being just an infrastructure company or focused on infrastructure to one very much focused on travel, trade and tourism markets. And I think that's a real hallmark of the change in airport companies around the world, and we'd like to think we were at the front of that change, which is we have a role to play in helping to improve tourism and trade outcomes. We are one of the few big tourism connected organisations in this country, and so we have a very important part to play in growing and developing international tourism markets. And I think early on that was a little hard for people to accept that an infrastructure company would be doing that, but I think we've now earned our stripes, and I think we are recognised by stakeholders as having a very important part to play in New Zealand's future.
And lastly, Adrian, what piece of advice would you give to a company that's got ambitions of one day joining the NZX?
Yeah, well, look, I think certainly what I've learned in this role and previously is it's really important to have a clear or a really sharp vision for what the future is for your company. Why do you exist and what are you about? Be very clear also on what drives your business, how do you make money, and be transparent about how that. And I think investors really want to understand really simply what makes the company tick, and so they can understand what the prospects are for the longer term. And look, beyond that, I think it becomes down to much more prosaic and simple issues. Have a great strategy, be passionate, and lastly, just hire great people, and everything else will follow from that.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, fantastic.